God has specifically chosen you to be here at this time and in this place. You have incredible potential, purpose, and calling to push back the darkness and be a light for Christ. Stand for nothing and you'll fall for anything. It's time to stand your ground. This is Unapologetic.
Everyone, and welcome to another special episode of Unapologetic. As part of the UNA team, I'm here to tell you more about the series we're diving into this spring called Unapologetic Conversations. These episodes will highlight the people who matter most in each of our lives, from our spouse and kids to others who play important roles, individuals like therapists and friends, all the way down to ourselves. Yep, what we say to ourselves does matter. The guest Julia interviewed for each episode in this series will help walk us through how to have these meaningful and sometimes tough conversations with the people who have the biggest impact on who we are as individuals and our relationship with God. This is wisdom I know I've needed to hear at different times in my own life, and I am so excited for you to get to listen in too. That said, let's get into it. We hope you enjoy this week's episode of Unapologetic Conversations.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Unapologetic. This week, I'm sitting down to talk with two-time Billboard #1 gospel artist Anthony Evans Jr. and well-known psychotherapist Stacy Kaiser. You may be wondering why I am talking to these two together. I was wondering too when I saw the information from the publisher. So what do a singer, songwriter, and a therapist have in common? Wait for it. Stacy is actually Anthony's therapist, and the two are opening up about the therapeutic process, especially as it relates to issues of faith. As a licensed professional counselor myself, I'm excited for and very intrigued by this conversation. I'm excited for you to hear how mental health and faith can work together to help us become the people God designed us to be. I am so excited to have you both. Welcome to Unapologetic.
Thank you. Thank you. We're glad to be here. I love that. That introduction is great. You're like, I'm wondering why this is happening. That's great.
Many people are wondering.
I mean, it was too good to pass up. So, I mean, this is going to be a good show. But let's
drama. Just kidding.
Before we get into it, let's start with the question I ask all guests. What do you wish Christians would stop apologizing for? Do you want to go first?
Start?
I can go.
Okay.
I wish Christians would stop apologizing when they're not perfect, because I believe we're not expected to be perfect, and it's impossible to be perfect.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, and I wish Christians would stop apologizing or feeling bad about the fact that they need extra help to get the principles that are in this Bible that we believe in, to get those principles solidified in their heart. I wish you'd not, which is kind of the same thing. It's another way of saying what Stacy just said, but yeah.
I've never heard it put that way because, we're going to just jump right in. I mean, as a therapist, and a Christian, I mean, I'm Christian too, but it's just a huge stumbling block that people have. Why do I need therapy if I have the Holy Spirit? Why do I need therapy if I have God's word and it's sufficient? And I know how I answer that, but I would love for both of you to answer that question.
Yeah, I think that sometimes Christians, including myself, have, I don't know, spiritual dyslexia. Like you just don't see things. Like I feel like personally, I mean, one of the smartest, most prolific men in the world is my dad. You know what I mean? And sometimes it's like being taught by Thomas Edison or Benjamin Franklin about electricity or light bulbs. It's just like, I should understand this. I'm in the class and my last name is Edison or Evans in this case. I should understand this. But if I have dyslexia or if I have a learning disability, it doesn't matter what my last name is. I need help to understand these principles. Wow. And because I'm so creative and an emotional person, I'm so different from my dad. I look like him, but we're built differently on the inside. Because I'm so emotional, and that comes with being an artist, there are times where I need help to make sense of what's in front of me, what's been in front of me my whole life. And I view my emotions as a superpower in some ways, creatively and artistically. But when you're trying to understand principles, it can feel like dyslexia because your emotions are so strong. So I need somebody to help me make sense of what's clear right in front of me. I can't make sense of this. So that is why I've chosen to add therapy to my faith.
That's very interesting. Okay, what would you say, Stacy?
I really think that people are sort of unsure of what goes on in a therapist's office. They think we're doing like psychic work or palm reading. And really it is helpful tools. And you always, use these comparisons. And I always think of, if you're not good at, your taxes, you're going to go to an accountant and nobody thinks that's strange. If you can't go, handle a legal issue or buy a home or do your own hair, you go to experts for that. And that is what therapists are, experts. And so there isn't weird, mystic things going on in the room. And I think if people really knew that it's really a conversation that's intended to provide support, that people wouldn't be so bothered by it.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that a little bit on a professional level, because you and I both know there is bad therapy and there are weird things that can go on. So how does a Christian know if they're seeing a good therapist, if they're getting a good therapeutic relationship?
That's a great question. Well, I always say there's bad people in every profession. So you certainly don't want to bad anything. But I think it's important to let the person that you're shopping for, you don't just walk into a therapy office. You get on the phone, you speak to them at first to let them know how important your faith is and to feel out where they stand with that. And if they can hold space for it, even if they're not a Christian therapist. I also think that one of the things that ends up happening is people are so nervous about going to therapy that they don't realize that you're coming to a business, just like if you were going to a hairdresser. And so it's important to interview the person and make sure that they're a right fit. And if you're not comfortable with them, you should leave right away and go find somebody who you do feel comfortable with.
And you're a licensed marriage and family therapist, right?
Yes.
So that was my supervisor was the LMFT, and he would tell us that we needed to tell clients we saw to ask, because there's so much apprehension around all of this, that they need to be asking, especially a marriage therapist, are you going to come to the end? Are we going to be in our therapeutic relationship 9 months down the road and you're going to say we should get divorced? Like he said, to ask that on the onset, because you need to know, which of course you're not supposed to really tell anyone to get divorced, as we know.
I mean, that's a really valid point. They're not supposed to tell you what to do. They're not supposed to tell you
to do that. But he said like that was just one example of asking, because worldview goes into therapy, like
for sure,
how you believe as a therapist, if you believe that there's reconciliation. I remember working with, I tell this story a lot on here, but a woman who was sexually abused, and she had gone through just all the process of trauma and recovering from that and everything, but she just could not shake the fact that she was supposed to witness to her dad. And that went like against secular psychology, of course, but she was in a Christian setting that was like, you're an adult, you're not in danger. If you feel like you're supposed to go have that conversation, I mean, we definitely like provided her with different ways to have that in a protective way. But I think that that's a good example of Christianity and therapy coming together, of processing trauma and healing, but then at the end of the day, feeling like I want to go witness to my non-Christian dad.
Yeah.
And so I think that's just an example of that. So we made a lot of jokes off air because, of course, I know all of the HIPAA guidelines and everything. We're like sworn to secrecy. We're basically in the FBI as therapists. So how is this okay? How are y'all both sitting here talking about this? And where did this idea come from, just to go public basically with your relationship?
Well, if any of you all know about how therapy works, it is a confidential relationship with some exceptions. Like if we think you're a harm to yourself or others, or you're abusing children or elders or things like that. But it is completely confidential. And so when Anthony approached me, which I'll let him tell you how and why, I was worried about the confidentiality piece. And so part of the deal we've made is that he's the one sharing his story and not me. And also he has signed away his confidentiality. And so I am allowed to acknowledge that I know him as therapist.
I can neither confirm nor deny that I know the person on the couch.
Exactly. If someone goes, is he your client? I can't confirm or deny, just like you said. Yeah. So I can confirm because he's given permission to do so.
And the reason why I wanted to give permission for that is because you mentioned apprehension earlier, and Stacy was talking about how people, the extreme version is like, what's happening in there is new age. It's like just the word therapy. It doesn't matter. Like some people feel that way. If you are at a church doing therapy, they're like, therapy is you're adding to God. Like, why do you need to add to God? And I wanted that to go away. I wanted that thought to help dispel that myth that's what it is, because it really is just giving me practical tools to work out. To read Be Anxious for Nothing is one thing, but to have tools on how not to be anxious, that's another thing. And that's helping you. And I wish that I had this help earlier on.
Yeah.
And so that's why I was like, hey, Stacy, can we it's been 6 years of me seeing you, and sometimes more intense than others. But at this point, I wish that I had this. And I know that there are people struggling with their faith. If we have, and I'm not putting that on you as I just put preacher's kids.
I can't wait to talk about the preacher's kids.
Okay, I just put this all in one thing.
A few minutes down the road, but we're getting into that for sure.
If we have, then most have, and so that's why I wanted to do this. And
and I just want, I talk to y'all about how we talk about therapy a lot in here because I really want people to get the help they need. But I want to go just a little more specific, and that's such a good example of Be Anxious for Nothing. I mean, everybody knows that Bible verse. And I just want to kind of let our listeners know something that would happen in Christian therapy is even just pointing to other verses. Like there are other verses that have to do with anxiety. It's not, I always joke, like you say, don't be anxious for anything. And then you just have all these Christians that are anxious because now they're also sinning and, learning about how to be still and learning about we do have control over our thoughts. I think that that's something that's really valuable in Christian counseling is even just getting a holistic picture of not only the verses that say things are wrong, but also the ones that help. So I know that's something that I've seen. So do you talk about like what caused you to seek out professional help?
Yeah.
Okay.
I do. Yeah, I do. And it's basically, I was at a point in my life where I liken it to having a sprained ankle and trying to walk without a limp. That's what was happening in my spiritual, emotional, mental life is that I had sprains in all those areas, but then I would go get on stage at different churches every weekend or conferences with my family and on stage act like I wasn't sprained in those or strained in those areas. Yeah. And when you try to act like you're not injured, you injure yourself more. Like if I'm an athlete and I'm injured and get on the court and play, you're going to, and I was good. Preacher's kids, we are good at taping up. I will say I keep looping you into this.
I'm sure we have similar issues.
I could tape myself up spiritually and emotionally and go play. And people would never know that I was injured. Yeah. And I got to a point where I was like, okay, I can't do this anymore. And I was desperate to find a therapist. And long story short is I had done a therapist that was based in a church. And they ended our first session with wanting to meet my dad. And I was like, I will never.
It's so terrible.
It was horrible. Okay. It was horrible.
And unethical also.
Yeah, it was so weird. And it messed me up. Like if I wasn't, I was like, okay, I'm not doing that again. And so I saw Stacy. She always says she's in the media. I've seen her on Good Morning America and Tyra and Steve Harvey and Love and Hip Hop and the Red Table Talk with Jada Pinkett. Like I've seen her do all these shows.
Right.
So I was just like, I'm going to be a creep and look at the credits and see who this is who's handling these scenarios great. Right. And her people vetted me to make sure I wasn't nuts because that's what crazy people do. It's like email from TV. I saw, so that's how we met. And I love the fact that she didn't know my family. That was like step one. Like, am I going to come in here with these presuppositions of me and who I am?
And this is like a very different way of looking at it. But I've encouraged a lot of people who I do know that are scared, like, what if a therapist knows who I am or knows who my family is or whatever? They legally cannot say that. Like, this is an unusual situation. It is wonderful to get to go to someone, tell them everything, and they legally cannot share any of it. Right. And hopefully we have relationships in our life that are secure and safe, but for some people really don't. And so getting to have someone that you can share anything with and know they legally can't tell. I mean, that's really wonderful, especially for people who are scared about other people finding out.
Absolutely. That's huge. That's huge.
So, I mean, we've already talked about it, so let's just jump in. Okay, so pastor's kid, I think they kind of go into one or two camps. It's either forget this isn't for me, or they are called to ministry or love the church, but can't necessarily be as real as they need to be or find the support they need. That's more what I have seen. Right. So what do you think? What do you think about pastors? No.
I'm just kidding. No, I'm kidding.
But I guess, it's not just pastors' kids. I think it's people in ministry and that grow up and wonder, like, was this really for me or was this put on me? What advice you have for kids wondering, is God for me? Like, is this something that I want to be a part of?
Well, the only reason why I'm like this, the only reason why I'm the kid in our family out of the four of us, I'm the emotional one. I look like a linebacker, but have the emotions of a ballerina.
Are you the youngest?
Whatever. No, I'm the middle. I'm third. Well, third.
Okay.
I am the one of the four of us that was most likely, well, me and one other one, I won't say who it is, but I was most likely to be like, this isn't for me. Mm-hmm. The only reason why I wasn't like, this isn't for me is because there was no separation of who my parents were at our house and who they were at church. And when everything blew up and my dad was in stadiums every weekend at Promise Keepers when I was a kid, like there was no different separation. We didn't, nothing was different. And so that's why I was like, okay, this is real. And that was huge for me. But I do believe that God doesn't have grandkids and you have to work out your own situation. And there was a minute when I left for college, I realized God doesn't have grandkids. Like this isn't, and it freaked me out because is this real for me? Or is this like, oh, your last name's Evans? That was a big moment. And I realized how much I had to work on back then. But my, I guess my advice to surmise it would be that don't be afraid of going on your own journey with the Lord in spite of your family and your background and all that stuff, because he is faithful to meet you on your journey and give you things along the way. There have been things that have happened with me and Stacy in our sessions that were specific to me from the Lord, from her. And it needed to come from her, not from a preacher or not from sitting in a room with, it needed to come from her.
It's a good story. You should tell it.
Okay. I don't know. There was a moment when I was, go ahead.
No, you gotta tell it.
Is this like a story?
But you'll appreciate this. You'll appreciate it.
Yeah. It was a moment where I have a family of Bible teachers. So I got all that from my family. And now it was Stacy. I need practical tools, but I was broken down, like just hurt and injured and broken. And we were doing the therapy thing and Stacy just stops. She stops the session and goes, "You're not going to believe what's happening right now." And I was like, "What is going on?" She's like, "Excuse me, there is literally like a light on you in this room." And again, this was heavy. This wasn't like a cute moment.
There were no lights on and there wasn't a window.
Yeah.
So it literally made me gasp.
Yeah. It's like amazing. Stopped and gasped and was like, basically, I don't even know if you said, you phrased it later. Like, basically, God wants me to tell you right now that you're more covered than you think you are. And he's with you in these moments. And and it was like, hearing that from my psychotherapist. Yeah. Tony Evans could have said that to me 14 different ways and it wouldn't have hit me the same way. So I believe that as you're trying to figure out your journey, when you do what you can, God will meet you in ways that you do not expect him. And that was one of the ways that I did not expect God to meet me on the clinical side of things. But he was like, I'm here too. And I'm actually going to impact you more in this area because I see you trying.
And it's just different. Like, it's a different relationship. I think people kind of like, well, I have friends or I have a pastor or pastor father, but like, it's different. It's a different situation. I know I talked about, like, I was trained as a family systems therapist. And so the whole premise is that change happens in the context of relationships. And so it's a relationship, a friendship that you're having with your therapist, and they're just able to say things in a different way. What was that like, having him just have that? I mean, it's amazing when clients have a light bulb moment.
It was incredible. Yeah. And I'm really connected to my faith as well, but it never happened to me before in a session. And I've been doing this for like almost 20 years at that point. Yeah. And I felt like I was supposed to give him a message and that if I didn't interrupt him in that moment, it was going to pass. Right. And we really connected in that moment also because I think you received it, right?
Yeah,
and
on a deep level.
Yeah, and then his mood changed. So it was a gift I'm not normally able to give, really.
Wow.
That's amazing. So I talk a lot because we're in student ministry and we write and, of course, do this show. And I would love for you to speak to this, Stacy. A lot of times people are frustrated, going back to the pastor's kid thing, like, but we know the theology. We've told our kids what's true. We're getting good preaching. I mean, I also sit under pretty great teaching. But I was really interested in learning about the left and right side of the brain, that we're getting that information. It can be great information. It can be true. It can be the best preaching in the world. and not just preaching, teaching, and parents teaching things to their children. But if we don't have that right side accessed, the relationship and being allowed to feel and allowed to question and process, it doesn't sink in as well. Have you found that to be true?
Absolutely. The metaphor that I always use is if you think of whenever you've gone to go see a magician and they will sometimes cut the woman in half and they'll stick that metal thing in and, you know, her feet are over here and her head is over here. That's what happens with the left and right brain. So you can have all of the knowledge, but it's not passing down where it needs to go into your heart and your emotional well-being. And I feel like that's a lot of what we're trained to do is to help people connect the pieces so that the message comes through better. And a lot of times messages that you've learned your entire life that are really helpful, good ones, start to grow bigger and stronger because of that connection.
Right. Yeah. So it's just getting everything connected. And so, you know, that's, you can get some of that through friendship, but there really is a different level with counseling. Of course, I think everyone should have a therapist, but that's my,
in this day and age,
that's my non-biased belief.
Well, I'm not a therapist, and I would say, everybody does. Because in this day and age, we all have, there's just a lot. We all went through. Going on. Yeah, we all have at some level PTSD from the pandemic. Like there's just stuff that happened. And anyway, I believe the same thing.
Well, so some people listening won't know what you mean by that. Do you want to elaborate?
Yeah, just the things that we all corporately have gone through. There were. I mean, it's just a rare thing that you could pass a mic to everybody in the world and they would have a different story of what this pandemic did to their lives, what it meant, losses that happened during those. That's what I mean. Just the trauma that goes along with that. That's just real. And it happens and it's okay that it happens. And you stuffing it down, which I've learned so much about that, stuffing it down does not benefit you. It doesn't help.
You're reading my mind. So we're going to go straight into, well, because I love that in your book. So you have a book that's coming out. It's When Faith Meets Therapy. It's right here. We'll just do a little.
Yes, it's out, actually.
Okay. It's out.
Yes,
it's out in the world. Go ahead and get it right now. It was really funny, actually. I have 4-year-old triplets, and this came in the mail. And they were like, open the package. I was like, it's a chapter book. Yeah. And my son went and took it and was like, where are the pictures? There aren't pictures, but there's great stuff in there. I want us to get into some of the specific lessons because a lot of the conversations kind of stop with, okay, so go see a therapist if you're stuck or if you need help. I want to go into some of the specific things, especially that I think Christians struggle with. And the first being, what is the balance or what is the truth around we are supposed to forgive? Like, I mean, we just are. Like, that's the obligation of the forgiven. We're forgiven as Christians. We're supposed to forgive no matter what. So where's then the limit on toxic relationships? Or, of course, like, I think that's where some pastors' kids and people that have grown up in the church, they're mad. They're like, well, I was just supposed to forgive and act like everything's okay.
Right.
And it wasn't okay. And maybe, parents weren't necessarily able to step in the way because of whatever the situation is. So the question is, what's the balance of forgiveness and, of course, putting boundaries on unhealthy situations and people?
Well, I think forgiveness is obviously, we know the 70 times 7, turn the other cheek. We get all that. But we also forget sometimes that you have to guard your heart because it's the wellspring of life. So you can forgive, but at the same time, guard your heart. And the problem that happens a lot of time in faith is that we think we're supposed to just keep and forgiveness without boundaries is a problem. Forgiveness without setting boundaries. And I'll let Stacy take it from there because she's taught me so much about that concept.
So this is such an important topic to us that it represents 4 chapters in our book.
Yes, I saw that. It's in
one
there a lot.
Right, one on forgiveness, a whole chapter, and then 3 on relationships, 2 of those being about toxic relationships. And forgiveness is important, not just because we're taught to forgive, but because when we don't forgive, it actually hurts us. Right? There's some saying about holding on to anger is like wishing someone else will, get sick, but poisoning yourself. I don't know how it works.
It's drinking poison and hoping it kills the other person.
Yes. So it's actually not good for anyone to not forgive. And that's why that's important. However, there are people in our lives, some of them are in our own homes or in our own families, where we literally interfacing with them hurts us mentally, physically, spiritually. And that is when we need to draw the line, like you said, the boundary. And so it's really about checking in with yourself and knowing that sometimes you need space from these people, or you need to bring buffers into the room. If there's a toxic person and you need to be around them, the more people, the merrier, so that you're not personally affected. And then the other thing we talk about in the book, and this is one of your favorite ones, so I'm gonna let you talk about it, is sort of being able to emotionally detach from the challenge of the person. And I will let you talk about that.
Well, yeah, I mean, the emotional detachment part was big for me to learn about that. But it can be surmised in saying I had to learn that there's an art of not becoming a victim to your own compassion. And
hold on, say it again.
there is
That's going to need to be on a t-shirt.
There is an art to not becoming a victim of your own compassion.
Okay.
And as people of faith, a lot of times your compassion, rightfully so, is on 10, which is beautiful. But there comes a point where it can turn on you and you become a victim of that. You keep putting yourself in harm's way, which we have conversations about all the time as related to how to handle different relationships and scenarios. So that is, when that starts, that means that the appropriate lines have not been drawn. You become
So I hate to put you on the spot, but I just have to think about the argument here. How can you biblically back up that you should separate from a toxic person?
I really think guarding your heart, like one of the many, off the top of my head, guarding your heart because it's the wellspring of life, or surrounding yourself with fools. Like there's so many verses in Proverbs that talk about foolish people and the company you keep and all that stuff. And so if you forgive somebody, but they're telling you the narrative of like, thanks for that forgiveness, but I'm about to do the same thing, or there's no effort to change, then that is where the guarding helps you. And, I will always see beautiful qualities in people and just, they're amazing. And a tiger is beautiful, but you don't go get in a cage with it. Do you know what I mean?
I think that's a great metaphor.
And my daughter asked me the other day, she goes, what is this? I said, this is a cheetah. I'm really bad at animals. So I was like, I hope that's a cheetah.
It's a leopard
and
cheetah.
she goes, is it dangerous? Because she was like, it was an animal. And I was like, yeah. But I mean, that's like such a good analogy. It can be really beautiful and soft, but you don't want to be with it.
Yeah.
And I just want to be clear. When I say detach, I don't mean disown and not speak to. I mean emotionally detach.
Yeah.
So that means we can be sitting in the room together. We can be at Christmas dinner, Thanksgiving, a family trip. But I'm not going to let myself be emotionally distressed with these interactions. And it has to do with being able to sort of talk to yourself. I always say it's like, you brush them off. You go, okay, I'm not going to let them bother me. I'm going to brush them off. And I tell people literally do the little brush off. And it's also about having grace for the person and saying, I forgive them because they cannot help themselves. And that's a way of stepping back also.
Yeah,
I know just a relationship like that in my life. And it was caused so much frustration and hurt for years. And then I found out their story. So, and it's just, there is a quote, it's like, there's very few people you can't love by finding out their story. And not that then they're your best friend, but just having some kind of awareness of why people act the way they do. I think is so amazing.
Sorry, can I just add one thing? I know this is totally your show. But I knowing somebody's story is amazing. And I'm trying to figure out the best way to say this. But knowing the story creates compassion. But we've talked about this again. There's another art of figuring out how to detach or create boundaries. And Stacy at one point talked to me about, she used a metaphor of my performing because that's what I do. She's like, if you were on stage and somebody kept pulling you out of character, at that point she used Broadway because I was auditioning for Hamilton or something. So she goes, if you were on stage and somebody kept pulling you out of character in the front row, what would you have to do? And I was like, somebody would tell them to be quiet. Okay, what if they're not quiet? You have to move them back. Okay, what if they're not quiet on the 15th row? Put them in the mezzanine. What if they're not quiet? You put them out. So the deal is—
I was in the mezzanine when I saw Hamilton.
Oh, okay, I love it. I love it.
It was difficult. I was like, I can't hear this very well.
What's going on? But the bottom line is, if there's anybody in your life that's pulling you out of character, even if like the person this, I'm just make it make sense, but if they have a story of the reason why they were being loud is because they have Tourette's or something they can't help, it still doesn't negate the fact that that noise is pulling you out of character. So you can't be so compassionate that you're like, oh, but they have an issue that makes them randomly disrupt me. That's great, but they have to be moved in the room for you to stay in character. And what happens is when you move somebody out of those front row seats that's being disruptive, the seats in my life have gotten filled with people who want to see nothing other than me be in the character that God's called me to be and support that, and vice versa. So it's not allowing hearing their story to make you go, okay, well, it's okay. They can be disruptive. It's still like, oh, I'm so compassionate.
Not that it's okay. It's more, how are you even going to be around them?
For real.
You know, like if it's really, you know, because we can't separate from everyone. Like I'm thinking about the church, and we can't just, you know, y'all were on the Sky Bridge, like walk the other way in the Sky Bridge. Like I don't see you. I guess I'm thinking more about, you know, Romans is we're supposed to be at peace with everyone as much as possible. So sometimes it's not possible.
Right.
I love that pulling out a character thing. I think also when you're an adult, you get to make different decisions than you do as a child and as a teenager. And maybe they can't separate.
Yeah, they can't control the
they
narrative
don't have any ability to control who they're around. Stacey, like, can you just provide some help and practical tools for teenagers that, you know, they're in a school situation, they're in a home situation, they can't physically separate, and of course they're having trouble emotionally separating?
What I would say is that you need to go find support elsewhere. So it doesn't have to be a counselor. It could be support from trusted friends or family members. I'm working with a teenager now whose parents are really toxic people, but she has a wonderful aunt. And she spends a lot of time with her and invites her along to all, you know, back to school night, graduations and whatever. So there's always a safe person in the room while they're like the two critical, nasty people, you know, who she actually came from.
Wow, that was a wonderful, wonderful thing. And then I think, you know, also most of us in church work try to be that for kids that don't have that support. I know, I mean, that's a main pillar of Ryan and I's ministry, is trying to be that safe person for children. I want to make sure I say this right because it was interesting whenever I read it in the book. Can y'all just end with discussing what it means to add hope to faith?
Yeah, I think that if you're looking at plans for, like right now, there's something at my house that was messed up, and so they came over and they just drilled and tore up part of my backyard, and it's horrible to watch this thing being torn up, but there was an issue with it that if it wasn't torn at this moment, there was going to be issues down the road. I think to look at this thing that's torn up and go, this is so that this can end up better. It creates hope that takes away, it doesn't take away the fact that this is torn up, but it takes away the frustration that's attached to it and gets me in a place where I'm excited about what there is to come. And as believers, because of verses like Philippians 1:6, that you can be confident that he's going to be faithful to complete what he started. When something is demoed in your life, he's going to complete what he started. So it creates a different perspective. And a lot of times that different perspective makes you take the first step toward healing.
Oh, that's wonderful. Yeah. That's so good.
I don't think I can say that any better. I would just add, from a psychological point of view, and you know this, hopelessness is a cause of depression and misery and impacts us in all areas of our life. And on a faith level, people who feel hopeless, I mean, I've had many people say to me like, where is he? I don't feel supported by him. Why would he do this to me? I'm not trusting even my own faith. My prayers are not working. And that's where the belief that hope that things can get better, hope that he will be there, hope that you can do anything to make you believe that tomorrow can be better. And the combination of the two, I feel, you know, helps mental health, which ultimately helps everyone's overall well-being.
Right. And just because we have so many young people that listen to this show, I want to go off that. A practical way of instilling hope is make a list of something you're looking forward to doing.
Absolutely.
Like, even if it's, I can't wait to go to the mall on Friday night. Something that's in the future.
You talk about that. It's one of
I do. Tips. That's one of the things we have.
I mean, it's one of the best things because you get so stuck. If you're hopeless, you're like, oh my goodness, like nothing's changing. And really, honestly, for teenagers, I'm going to just keep thinking about teenagers like that do feel stuck. Like a lot may not be changing until they graduate. So finding things to look forward to and that hope that this really isn't all there is. You get to graduate.
And one day you're going to be an adult.
Yes.
Do I have a quick second to tell a story?
Please.
One of my clients, her parents don't believe in having any furniture in your room. You just get a bed. And all of her friends have like nightstands, dressers, bookcases. It's like, where do all your things go? Well, they have to go in the closet. So there's just an empty room.
It's like a religious belief? Oh, sorry.
I don't think it's a religious belief. I think it's just
an important question.
OCD
an OCD thing. Like it's I like empty space is really what it is. We don't like clutter, so it all has to be hidden. And it is so depressing to her. And I said, what I want you to do is go on Pinterest and make a Pinterest board of what your room is going to look like when you're an adult.
Yes.
Because one day, all of the teenagers are going to be, 18, 20, 25, 30, 40. You'll be making your own decisions. You can do whatever you want. And so sometimes hope is a long ways away, but it's coming. And time does go faster when you get older.
That's wonderful. Okay, I'm upset about the furniture, but
so am I.
Gosh. Okay, so can we just end with you telling us about the book? How can we stay connected to what y'all are doing, and where can we buy?
Yeah, well,
When Faith Meets Therapy.
When Faith Meets Therapy is available everywhere. And I wanted to just say just a little blurb about it. And that is, I needed things like, I need practical tools. So this book isn't just like story time. At the end of every chapter, there are practical tools, tips, ways to get started in your journey. There's a way to connect with your own therapist or try to find your own, like there's, that's what's going on. But it's available everywhere. Or they can go to whenfaithmeetstherapybook.com and then pick a vendor, pick a source, pick a way to get it. Yeah.
Amazing.
Or if they're like me, they can listen to it.
Oh, good. Yeah. Did y'all read it?
We did.
Oh,
we read
good.
it. So
I did that for my book. That was fun.
Yeah,
it's
really
awesome.
fun.
Well, thank you so much for being on. This was really important. And I'm so excited for both of your ministries.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you for tuning in today to Unapologetic. This was a really encouraging and intriguing discussion on when faith meets therapy. I hope that you will share this with someone in your life that needs this encouragement. And remember, you can hear today's episode and more at ptv.org/Julia and wherever you get your podcasts.